And we are back with the second part of our Indie Game Spotlight Stream recap for the month of January 2020. As always, the games you're seeing have been submitted by indie developers, and we are always looking for more games to play. And we're beginning with a very quick one. This is Puzzle Tower. This is a first-person kind of puzzle/adventure game. The idea is that we are climbing this tower where every floor is essentially its own puzzle. And we have to solve the puzzle, move on to the next floor, rinse and repeat. From a presentation standpoint, unfortunately, I don't think the game does a lot with it. Again, it's very basic first person and 3D graphics here. And the puzzles themselves started to get annoying to run. There's a lot of elements where you're having to click on something or do an interaction, and there's no way of knowing what exactly that interaction is going to do without having to look around and figure out things on your own. Like right here, the buttons that I'm pressing are changing the rotation of these barrels, and the barrels have to align with the dots on the ground. But the problem is that you don't know what button corresponds to which barrel until you start like running around trying to find them. And it's just some of the more, I think, cumbersome and frustrating examples of puzzle design. And yes, for those of you watching this, all the puzzles are built on a linear solution. So there's no way to kind of experiment or do anything that isn't the exact puzzle for it, or the exact solution. And the point where I kind of got tired of this game was during the ever popular slide the boxes in their correct position puzzle, where you can only hit them on specific spots, and if you hit them in the wrong place and moves, you may not be able to get back to that previous location. So there are most likely more interesting puzzles in Puzzle Tower, but it was just, I think, too annoying and too frustrating for me to play this on stream to really spend the time with it. So if you're really looking for a new adventure game or a new puzzle style game, this one is definitely there, and they do come, or it does come with a hint guide that you can watch from the main menu as well. But with that, we'll move on to our next game, and this will be another quickie. So we move to the game Lovesick Darlings. This is a visual novel game that it did have a successful Kickstarter, and we were playing the demo that's available on Steam. And as always with visual novel games, there really isn't a lot for me to discuss here. And while I'm happy for the developer to submit the game, unfortunately, there's just not much here we can really dig into. From what I played of it, it seems like your standard kind of design, making choices with which dialogue, which will influence which endings, and things like that. And for this demo, it is pretty much, I think, uniformly just on rails for the entirety of it. And we played as far as kind of, I think it was like the end of the demo, where the game basically reveals that we're going to have to do even more playing to figure out how things get to this point. So, unfortunately, like I said, it's not a game that we can really dive too far into, but again, I would like to thank the developer for submitting it. And with that, let's move on. And we turn to the game Mortal Glory. This one I had some really high hopes for, after seeing people mention this on Twitter and reading the description, and unfortunately I don't think it quite hits that point. But the idea is that we are playing a gladiatorial fantasy management style game with roguelike elements to it. The concept is that you build a gladiatorial team out of various characters. The characters are randomly created based on their race, as well as what kind of stats and starting abilities they have. Your mission is to then outfit them, build them up via training and random events, and take them into combat, which is handled in a turn-based form. And winning a mission will earn you more resources, which you can then basically reapply back to your team. You can recruit more characters, and you lose if you basically fail 3 matches at basically per tournament level. Now, combat itself, like I said, is all turn-based and plays more like a classic roguelike in that regard. Characters can unlock skills, or you can use spell books to teach them new abilities. And as with games of this kind, the stat management of characters is a very big deal. One very powerful character can easily wipe the floor with several weaker characters. And as you complete the game, you get that feedback loop of growing more in power, being able to add more characters, and so on and so forth. And at the basic idea, or the basic concept, I really like Mortal Glory, but the overall design, I think, doesn't quite hold up. So, the first problem is that the campaign structure basically forces you into a win or lose scenario. Because the second you start losing battles means that you're not getting the resources, you're not probably getting your characters trained in order to meet with the ever-escalating difficulty curve. Not only that, but because of how the randomization works in terms of what characters you get and their stats, it can lead to you in a position where you're just not really able to progress and you're not sure why. The game spawned some characters who literally had like 10 points of health, and for a character like that, they are dead like the second anything sneezes on them. And I don't think the game does a good enough job of properly explaining the relation of stats and skills. You can see the combat log in the bottom left hand corner of the screen behind my face there, and it's a lot of information that I don't know how many people are going to really be able to understand what is going on, especially how fast things will basically scroll up there. So I had cases where all of a sudden one enemy would just crit and one-shot my guy, and then my team was just like, in another one, they were just winning, and it was hard to understand what was the difference. Now, the random events are also tied to the roguelike atmosphere of the game. That the concept is that the run is going to be very short, and then you can replay with a new build, new characters, and there's also harder modes that are unlocked as well. And I was really hoping, again, for a game that would scratch that progression loop itch of kind of like a management sim, but coupled with more of the roguelike or combat elements to it. And in this one, the management side is kept very basic. The store and the pool of fighters or recruits are randomly shuffled after each match. But beyond that, there's not much you can really control or really hope to get out of those systems. With the turn-based combat getting the most in terms of its depth, but it's still that case where it feels like the battle was already decided before we even began it. Because even if your characters get powerful spells, if they don't have the defense to survive, there's no real sense of zone of control or being able to lock enemies down like that, so they'll just go around, smack that character, and kill them. And when a character runs out of health in the arena, the next battle, they'll have less health. And if they get essentially 3 wounds, that character is permanently killed. So unfortunately, this one makes it kind of a hard sale. Like that other Gladiator game we played a few months ago. That nobody's managed to, I think, really get that combination of the management sim and the action or combat systems down. But hopefully the developers will keep expanding on this, and we have seen some other interesting games in the management style that I'm hoping will be released later on this year. But with that, let us move on. And we turn to now the game Luna the Shadow Dust. This is an adventure game that had a successful Kickstarter and is coming out in the middle of February. The footage that you are seeing is from the public demo that is available from the Steam store page, and I'll probably have more complete thoughts on the game after it's released. We also did a podcast interview with one of the developers on it, and that should be going up probably around the same time. But the game features a very gorgeous handmade aesthetic to the characters and environments. It kind of reminds me in a weird way of Adventure Time, just because our main character here has those rabbit ears. But developers were inspired to create, in a way, more of a moderate to challenging challenging puzzle game. The main mechanic is that you switch between the boy and our little pet there in order to solve puzzles. And similar, I guess, in a weird way to Puzzle Tower, you are climbing this tower here, with each floor being its own self-contained puzzle. There does not seem to be any carryover or reason to return to a place. And when I spoke with a developer, she was very intent on trying to keep the difficulty curve to be balanced, as in it's going to be a bit on the easier side to start with and then grow in difficulty and complexity as the game goes on. Now, I solved this puzzle very quickly simply because I played this demo off stream before we did it for the Spotlight, so I kind of knew what I was doing here. But as with adventure games of this type, you're challenged to basically figure out whatever quirks or elements are on each floor, and then take that to build out the solution itself. So it's never going to be as simple as just opening up a door. As you can see with me doing a whole lot of moving to create wine, which in a way will open up our door. I really love the background art for this game and kind of the character models. The walk cycle of our main character looks a little bit weird. I think probably could use a little bit more in terms of animation frames. But this game definitely has a lot going for it in terms of the presentation and aesthetics. The only problem is that the demo itself was, I think, only about 4 or 5 floors in, so we really couldn't see where the depth of the puzzle design will get to in Luna the Shadow of Dust. We'll be reaching some of the more esoteric levels that we see in games like Myst, Thimbleweed Park, and so on, or will it do its own thing? And when I get to play the full game very soon, hopefully I'll be able to answer that. But I would say this one is definitely a really strong candidate if you're looking for a solid adventure game, and again, you really want to admire an ooh and ah over some hand-drawn art. But there isn't too much else we can say about the game from a design standpoint now. So we're going to do our quick Patreon supporter and sponsor shout out now, and when we come back, we'll see how many more of our indie games can we get through in this part. And now for a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. Going forward, all Patreon supporters will get early access to our videos. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. For our next game, we turn to the very weird and, I guess, kind of YouTube-friendly game, Speaking Simulator. The basic idea, as our robot over there is trying to do, is that we are trying to fool people into thinking that our robot is actually a human. And that requires us to manipulate his tongue and those various buttons you see on the left-hand side, as well as his face, to make him sound like he knows what he's talking about. And yes, if you think that that face over there can't get any weirder, then you are wrong. The idea is that you're trying to perform the correct actions and the correct facial movements while the character is talking. If you take too long or hit the wrong button, it raises the suspicion meter. When that meter fills up all the way, you lose the level. And each level basically throws in little new elements to it, such as having to control your eyebrow, your jaw, where your eyes are looking, etc., etc. And this is, again, one of those games that it feels like it's aimed for kind of like the streamer, YouTuber audience, rather than being, I think, an engaging game on its own. For those of you who remember, I wasn't a big fan of titles like I Am Bread or Octodad Dadliest Catch, where the point of the game is that you're dealing with a frustrating control scheme that you're trying to make it work. And this is definitely a frustrating scheme. I had a lot of trouble with the game registering the buttons that I'm pushing with his tongue. Sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, even as I'm moving his mouth around, the incorrect button gets pressed despite not touching the tongue. And this is one of those games that either the novelty is going to wear off for you within probably like a minute or so of playing it, or you'll play through it all just to see how weird and interesting the gameplay and where the story goes with it. But for me, I don't think there was enough here to really keep me interested. And like I said, if you're not into kind of like these very wacky kind of designs, then I don't think Speaking Simulator is going to work for you. But with that, we're going to move on to I think what will probably be our final game for this part of the spotlight. And we're moving on to the modern retro CRPG, Skjold Against the Black Priory. This comes from one of the developers we spoke to, who's working on kind of being inspired by the old school CRPGs, the age of Baldur's Gate, Might and Magic, and other ones that I have very little experience playing. And the goal, of course, is to make a game in that style, while still trying to be accommodating or open for new players. The footage that you're seeing right now is from an alpha build, so this may not represent the current version of the game, and I believe it is only available to backers, and he was kind enough to give me a key to spotlight for the stream. But Skjold follows through with the standard CRPG formula. You're going to build a party of 4 from various classes, distribute skill points, and basically go on an adventure. Something evil is happening in the land, and it's up to you and your party to figure it out. You're able to talk to just about everyone in the game, make deals, fight, and the story will of course grow and change based on the decisions that you've made and how you handle what is going on. As you can see with the combat, it is entirely turn-based. And to be fair, it is a little bit on the clunky side right now. For instance, if you hit the cast a spell button on a character who doesn't have any spells, it just automatically ends their turn, instead of letting you choose something else. And it was kind of hard to find specific skills to make use of during combat. For what I did, I just basically turned on auto-resolved, and that kind of got through a lot of it as well. But as with classic CRPG design, you can build your party out of warriors, thieves, wizards, healers, things like that. And there is a different system for using spells than there is for your melee or special talents. From what I played, the map is entirely handmade, so you're going to be exploring the dungeons. And as an interesting touch, it seems like combat is based on how many enemies are on the screen when you initiate it. So it doesn't seem like the encounters are going to be random, in the sense that you hit this guy one time, it's going to be 3 enemies you fight, you reload, you hit him again, this time it's only going to be 1 enemy. And the game has that good pixel art kind of look to it. Again, for the people who are watching this, a few of them were commenting how much they liked this style, having grown up with it. For those of you who didn't, I'm curious to see what you think about it there. But with Skjold, the demo itself, we played about, I think it was 30-40 minutes of it, just enough to get through this opening dungeon itself. And I'm not sure how much of it is kind of in the demo. But as I said, I am not a CRPG player by trade, so I can't tell you whether this is a good, bad, or amazing example of it. But along with something I think it was Nox Arcanus, that we spoke to the developer of that as well, if you are a fan of this kind of old school CRPG design, I think this game is going to have a lot for you to enjoy. And I was getting into kind of the quality of the pixel graphics, and kind of to see where things would go from here. Again, we didn't want to play too much of a pre-alpha build of a game because it may sully our impressions of it. And I'll be curious to see how this game develops in the coming months. And with that, we are about at our time for part 2 of this Indie Spotlight. I'm thinking we have at least one full part left, maybe going to part 4. It really depends on what I have to say about the rest of the games. But as always, I would like to thank developers who have submitted games for the Spotlight. You'll find links to their games in the description down below. And if you'd like me to cover your game for a future Spotlight, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and we're always looking for new developers to come on to talk about their design and thoughts on game dev. With all that said, that's going to do it for part 2 of the Indie Spotlight recap video for January 2020. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, take care. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.